All right, welcome back. This is the Young Playwrights Guide Conversations. I'm here with Walter Rodriguez. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, good. How are you,
Good.
Jim?
I'm good. I don't think I've ever called you buddy before.
No, I think it's the first time.
I don't know where that came from. It's the spirit of the conversation. So you're at home, obviously. We're all
Yep.
at home.
Yep.
Trying to figure out this weird little time.
Yeah.
Um, before we get into that and sort of how that's affected, what you're doing and the work that you do generally, just give us a little background. Like, who are you? Where'd you come from? How'd you get into the creative work? You work in theater. That's actually our background. We used to work
Yeah.
together at a theater company doing work in the education department. But you do a lot of other creative work that connects to theater. It's different from theater. So just give us a little background. Who is Walter Rodriguez?
Oh man, that's a tough question. So I got into, ever since I was a kid, I'd always liked art, but it was physical art at the time, like visual stuff. And I never thought about it as a career. I got into it, and I got into the theater side of things and acting side of things in high school. I tried out for the high school musical, which Dover at the time. Now there's like a thriving theater department that we started. Our senior year was when they kicked it off. We had lots of like petitions and all of that. I did the musical just kind of to find something to do. I'd been running cross country in the fall, and I'd been doing track in the spring, and just kind of finding something in that middle time. And I had an amazing theater teacher who kind of taught me that it's more than what I thought, where you just stand up there and you say a couple lines and you get a laugh, or you sing a song or whatever.
Right.
So in Mary Walker, who was that theater teacher, had actually worked at Playwrights Theatre. I didn't find this out until years later when I was working there too. So she was somebody with a real, like, quote unquote, real theater background. She actually studied it, did it professionally, and then ended up teaching. So that's how I got into theater. Ended up lots of stuff that we don't need to talk about, but ended up getting into it professionally. And my first real kind of work outside after graduating, after college, was at the Onion. So trained for theater, but then ended up, I did some tech theater stuff in between at 12 Miles West Theater Company, but ended up nailing the Onion, getting the Onion pretty early on. And so we were a small little group back then. There were like 7 of us that were doing everything. So that kind of introduced me to, it was a weird thing because it was on the web, but it was functioning like television more than anything for the first couple seasons. And then we went on to TV. We were on network TV on Comedy Central and on IFC. But it taught me all about, all of the other parts. So I learned about theater production in college, but learning lighting for television was different. Learning location scouting, which you don't have to worry about in theater, was different. Art department stuff, which is very different. Like a production designer in film, which is one of the things that I learned to do really well, is very different from doing art department stuff in theater. So that kind of dragged me into there, dragged me into New York. While I was there, I started to do photography, and I ended up doing a lot of editorial and fashion stuff while I was in the city. So got that background, which again, kind of tied into some of the visual stuff that I was doing before. Started to do graphic design. It just kind of snowballed, and I ended up just really enjoying. One of the things New York taught me, which is something that we'll probably end up touching on in this talk anyway, because it's been my career, is that in high school, I was never one of those people that said, I want to be a thing, like this title. I was always somebody that just kind of said, I want to do things that I enjoy for a living, and that help people, and be able to pay my bills. There was no like, I want to be rich, I want to be famous. None of that's ever interested me at all. But I think having that mindset going into a career helped me, because as I was in the city and I was like, oh, photography is really interesting, let me do this. And then I ended up doing museum work too. I put together the Harry Potter exhibit in New York twice, and did a bunch of other things. The Spy exhibit was there, Odyssey, that was shipwrecks and like real shipwrecks and pirate treasure and stuff like that. There was never that thing in my brain going, this isn't the thing you signed up for. You know what I mean?
Right.
So as I've been kind of dragged myself through all of these different types of jobs and things, it's just been about discovery and about finding the next really interesting thing that I want to try, the next adventure, and just diving wholeheartedly into it without that limitation in my brain of like, that's not the job title that I studied for or wanted. So that's kind of a long way. I mean, there was a longer path through it, but just kind of touching on some of the things that I've been doing. And obviously I'm an actor, I'm a teaching artist now, worked with Playwrights Theatre and then Writers Theatre for years and years and years. God, I'm feeling old right now. I just had but spent over 10 years as a teaching artist now.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool. And that's something that I never thought that I would end up doing and love. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just as you started talking, I was thinking, and you answered this. How did you get involved with the education department at Playwrights Theatre, Writers Theatre? And I think it's probably through 12 Miles West.
No, it was actually through, so Stephen Davis, who's a theater
Oh,
professor
okay.
oh man,
Well, he's at Centenary now.
Centenary, yeah, Centenary.
Yeah.
So Stephen cast me in a reading, and the reading was at Writers Theatre. And
Okay.
I was in New York at the time. I was working for The Onion, but I missed plays. I missed doing theater because the film world and the TV world is so different. And I never, once I left TV, I was like done.
Yeah.
I never really wanted to go back to it. But I miss theater. I miss being on stage with people just because of that camaraderie that exists. It's so different because it's a trapeze act. It's live and something could go wrong. And so you really count on all those people around you to help and to make sure that everything keeps moving forward. And there's this excitement and there's this sense there that's not in film because you can just do another take. I mean, we do so many takes of things in film.
Oh yeah.
And it's not the same. It doesn't have that same kind of depending on each other feel. So Stephen cast me in this reading. I was like, oh, I haven't done theater in such a long time. Let me do it. So I went to Madison where Playwrights was, and did the reading with him. And while I was there, Danny Constance, who's the wife of the artistic director, John Petrowski there, got my information. And I think within a couple of weeks of that, Alex Sarian, who I think was the director of education at the time, had sent me a message. He's over at Lincoln Center now. I think he was the executive director at Lincoln Center. But he sent me a message and he was like, hey, we'd love to use you for other readings. And so then I started to interface with you. I think you were one of the first main contacts that I had there.
Yeah.
And got involved with all of the teaching artists that were there at the time. It was Tara and Ben Clausen and all of those people. So just kind of like joined the family.
Yeah. That's actually, you're mentioning all those names. It was Steven, someone actually I should reach out to.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen him or talked to him in a long time. It's just too great to catch up. But even for one of these conversations, he'd have a lot of great insight. He's actually one of the first people I talked to when I was starting to work on my my doctorate.
Oh, great.
As far as like interviewing and really getting into sort of the philosophy of why we do things.
Yeah.
He had a lot of great insight with that. So I should reach out to him. But yeah, go ahead.
With the weirdness of the time that's happening right now where we're all stuck in these little boxes because we can't go
Yeah.
outside, Stephen actually he's still teaching or was teaching movement for the actor via Zoom, which I thought was really cool.
Right.
So figuring out you and I talked about this just a little while ago. I did my first ever full play reading, new play reading online just a couple of weeks ago for Ian August, a playwright friend of mine. And it's really difficult. I was playing 12 characters and it's really difficult to play 12 characters when you can't use your body because in theater, especially, and this was written for theater, this is a play that we were doing. It's bigger than life and it's bigger than film acting where it's like you're raising an eyebrow and that means so much and it conveys so much. So the writing's different. And so I'm playing 12 different characters and trying to figure out how to make all 12 of them distinct enough to be readable by all of the audience that we had, because we had a bunch of people online, other playwrights and people that were watching, but not being able to do much. So I started to use my hands more, which I'm going to like bring into the frame a lot more.
Right.
And figure that out because physicalization is so difficult when you're just a head. So Stephen, I think, is one of those people that I think is going to be really interesting to connect to right now because he's trying to teach people how to be physical in this kind of new temporary world where we're just talking heads.
Yeah, no, actually, that would be great. We were talking before, but too about my middle school classes. That one of the things I have not done with them in the 5 weeks that we've been doing the remote schooling is anything physical. I haven't done a live class or anything like that. Been using I don't know if you know the program Flipgrid.
Oh no.
It's mostly an educational tool, but I know there are other sites that use it. But you put something onto a grid, and then people can log in and submit a response directly, connected to what the first question is. So it's sort of a way to give feedback
Yeah.
without being connected. But what I did was we did our first acting exercise with a new class where like we passed the prop. And what I did was I created something out of ball clay, and then I handed it to the camera
Oh, that's
and said,
great.
next student needs to take it. And so it was kind of neat because sometimes kids were logging it at the same time, so they were both doing the same thing. But there was one class we made almost all the way through 17 students where it was what had gotten handed over was the thing picked up. And it just looked really neat because it almost looked like we were actually in a class
Oh, that's so
and doing
cool.
that. But again, it's in the box.
Right.
So to be able to do things a little bit larger would be great. Because, what I'm trying to do with them is get them used to connecting with an audience,
Yeah.
ironically.
Yeah.
And how do we present ourselves in front of a group of people? So
Mhm.
yeah, so good, Stephen. That's a good connection, and that's the thing too that I think is important for this conversation and the audience here that you've mentioned, Tara Henderson mentioned too. Is just the connections that you make at any moment. You never know how important they're going to be. She actually talked about one of the best things she learned about auditioning was you're not playing for the role, you're playing for the room,
Yeah.
or you're auditioning for the room. And she said that when we started doing all this virtual stuff the last few weeks, she got a call from a theater company she had auditioned with where they actually had her old black and white headshot.
Wow. Yeah.
That's how far back it went. Yeah, but so, and Alex too, like you mentioned, Alex was he was working with me. He was the assistant director of education, and then from there moved into, I think, Urban Stages, and then was at another organization. Then he worked his way up to executive director of international programming at Lincoln Center. He's running an organization in Saskatchewan now, I think.
Oh, is that where he is? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like he's the executive director of this provincial arts program. So it's just, and I mean that, you meet someone when they're starting, and then as they advance in their career, you never know
You're
what the
right.
network's going to be. But even the smallest thing, like you go into an audition room, that casting director doesn't put you in this role, but there's going to be something else down the line.
Yeah. I
Those
auditioned for.
connections are important.
Yeah, I auditioned for one of those Discovery. Discovery has this like murder network now where they do like all of the true crime shows or whatever. So I auditioned in the city for one of those Discovery shows. I think it was Red Rum. And I went, oh, strangely enough, I was at the audition, and as I was outside prepping, this guy, Jamie, who was one of the understudies for Our Dad is in Atlantis in Jersey when I was doing it, was one of the other guys.
Yeah.
I mean, with the casting breakdown, we're similar looking, which is why, So,
Yeah.
but it was funny seeing him there. But walked in, did the audition for the show, and I could tell right away that it wasn't right for me. Like the part was this enormous, like muscled, like huge guy gangbanger, and I'm not really that type. I don't really get those very often. So I knew like it's not the role for me, but
Yeah.
you play whatever it is. And then I got a call 2 months later for something else that one of the casting agents was casting for, and he was like, "Hey, I remember you from the audition. Obviously, you were playing against type. Do you think you could play this?" So just tossed me the script, and we just went from there. It was great.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. And it's it's interesting too to hear you talk about sort of you're in it. You've kind of gone in. I'll say it this way. You didn't say this, but you kind of went in and out of. You go in and out of theater.
Oh yeah.
Even with your first experiences with it in high school, you came from a different art into the theater as an actor, and then you've done other things.
Yeah.
What are you? I mean, we're in a unique world right now too, which has some impact on this. But I think it's worth talking about. Again with the topic of the conversation. But what are you doing now? Like, what if you were to give yourself a title? What are you doing now? What are you spending most of your time doing now?
So I started a company. I want to say last spring, so about a year ago. I started a company using some of the skills that I'd learned when I was at Writers Theatre. I was the director of marketing there, and on top of doing the teaching artist stuff and the acting. And so I started a company because I thought that I saw a lot of small businesses doing marketing wrong. They don't really know how to do social media because it's kind of new, and a lot of small business owners, especially ones that have been there for a long time, are older, and they don't really understand that when you change the medium that much, everything changes. So they've been doing a lot of advertising that's targeted towards television.
Mm.
And so you have these long commercials. A lot of them were done kind of the old school way where people are just yelling into the camera and it's like sale, 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 and all this like very old timey, like 1980s, 1970s kind of stuff. And so I saw an opportunity to kind of bring my television background and bring the production, like film and TV production stuff into small business. And so specifically targeting small businesses that can't afford to hire marketing people all the time and can't afford social media people that are full-time. I would work for them for X amount of time, depending on different packages, but creating essentially media that is built for social media, which is much shorter videos, everything from like 5 seconds to 15, and figuring out new ways of engaging people, because the landscape is very different in social media. You don't want people yelling at you and giving you ads all the time. People turn off websites because of that, because of all of the ads in your face. But what they're really looking for is just really engaging content, finding things that, if like one of my clients is an Italian deli, so some of the things that I'll do for them is features on the different kinds of Italian food that they make. Where did they come from? Where did eggplant parm originate? When was the first time that it was written down as a recipe? What was that like? And how has it evolved over the years? And so people really respond to that because it's stuff that you don't really figure out anywhere else. You don't find anywhere else. So just essentially kind of content creation. But I am the owner and creative director at The Scene Shop. So thesceneshop.com. Give us a follow on all of our social media and all of that stuff.
That's right. And so we get it correctly too. It's SEEN
Right.
shop, not scene shop, like we would create something for.
Right. Yeah. So it's, in theater, we have scene shops where we build all the sets and stuff, which is where the title came from, the name came
Yeah.
from. But great. Because it's marketing, it's all about being seen.
Yeah. What I'm hearing in that too is you said the word engaging, and I'm wondering too if it's it's an interaction. Like I was saying, it's something I'm trying to look at with. We're an actor here. There's an audience there. We're trying to interact with each other.
Yeah.
Is really the essential core of theater for middle school students, or how where am I going to use this in my life is sort of the question I'm trying to answer.
Yeah.
In my classroom. But it sounds like you're doing that too. That we could take as a core component of theater, and
right.
It also becomes then it's marketing, it's communication, right?
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
So and I like that too, that you're giving I don't want to call it trivia. It's definitely not that, but it's almost you're educating the customers of the Italian deli, which then keeps them engaged to want to go back and that's how chicken parm was made. I'm going to go eat the big chicken parm sub and
because I feel like we've evolved into a very smart, please let this be true, into a very smart world where we have the answers to so many questions available via Google, just like at the drop of a hat. I mean, I lay in bed at night and sometimes it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm looking up like the most random things, like where did eggplant parm come from? And I think because the information exists, we're fine with it just being out in the world somewhere in that nebulous cloud. But I think people love when that stuff is surfaced, when there's questions that you would have asked if you'd actually thought of them and they just appear in front of you. I think that's something really cool. There's so many times where friends share articles online that I think are interesting. I mean, and this is all essentially storytelling anyway. Which is
great.
Yeah. And one of the things that when I'm writing a play, when I'm sitting down to create something new, one of the things that I ask myself is, why would anyone want to watch this? Why would anyone want to see this or hear this? And I have to dig into myself where I have to look at ideas that I think would be really interesting, or a fact that I found out about that kind of drew me down the rabbit hole where I started to learn more about an entire subject because of like one little tidbit. And it's that exact thing. I think if we talk about chicken parm and they're interested in finding out about the history of where it came from and how it's so different now than it was then, you start to look at all the different ways that it was made. And all of a sudden somebody's sitting at home going, all right, now I have these like 8 different recipes for chicken parm. I'm going to try to make some of them and compare it with what you're doing. And all of a sudden there's like, it's a space for creation. It's a space for where it's no longer about the product that my client is selling, and it's not about the post that I created. It's about that person sitting home, taking information that they've now I gave them a little bit, but they looked into it some more and really taking that information and making something new. which is
Yeah.
what playwrights do. We synthesize, we take ideas and we take facts, and we just synthesize something brand new out of them. And that's what creativity, I think, is.
Yeah, and I think I mean, if I were, there's a lot of talk about creators and influencers,
Yeah,
right? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Whatever these terms mean is, you know, I think it varies from people to people. But I
yeah,
think really what you're describing too is it's almost you're really a creator,
yeah,
right? I mean, we can put all the slashes in and
right.
you know, fill up 3 lines of a business card
That's,
for you. But
I
yeah,
usually
it
use
sounds like really
creative.
that's at the heart of everything, right? You're creating it and you're engaging people.
Yeah, I usually use creative if I have to do a general business card, which sometimes happens because you've seen
Yeah,
all of the business cards.
yeah.
So I usually just use a creative, and especially when like my girlfriends, when I go out with them and their friends ask, "What does your boyfriend do?" It's usually a really long. So I usually go with I'm a creative, and I talk a little bit about. I mean, now I can kind of introduce myself as a business owner, but I've been doing that for a long time.
Sure.
But just kind of making it easier because I think in all of the things that I've done in my life, the except for maybe working retail, I think the common thread has always been that creative thing. It's
Yeah,
just figuring out how to tell a story, how to to share something with somebody, something new with someone.
sure. That's great. That's great. And I think, you know, again, it's one of the reasons I want to have these conversations with, you know, with you and Tara and Brittany, you know, later, some of these, you know, some of the other folks that I'll talk with first as we start to get this rolling too, is because you'll have that same sort of mentality and purpose and philosophy,
Yeah,
whatever word we want to put on it, about
I
the work to
honestly,
do. And I think that that's important. Given now that we're sort of forced into having to really rethink the world and how we interact with it and what we do and how we do the things we want to do. But I even think, and we've talked about this in the past, but just given all the technology over the last 10 years and what we have in the palm, literally in the palm of our hand sometimes. You know, I mean, I'm creating, the kids wanted to do a YouTube video here at home. So I mean, we're doing it on our phone. It's,
awesome.
you know, crazy to be able to produce film on a phone.
Yeah,
But, you know, now that we have all of that at our disposal, I think, it's really important for young people, and I'm looking at like ages 8 to 18, but I mean, whatever that means, you know, to if they're thinking about creating theater, or they're interested in telling stories or engaging audiences or whatever, and some of them are content creators online, you know, but it's looking beyond that and where else can I do this, and that's I'm glad to have you to be able to talk about all those different avenues you've expressed with that, because I think, you know, you're doing all of those constantly, and you're alive and you're eating and you're in a room that I assume you live in, so it's
yeah, yeah. Paying
yeah,
bills and doing all that stuff. I think
I
when you
know.
said that, that some of these other people have that same kind of mentality, I think it really is just. I mean, one thing that you and I have talked a lot about. We did a workshop. We were panel guests on a
Oh
workshop
yeah, yeah,
about
that's
being a
right.
professional in theater. I think it's you're forced to have to learn to do all of these things, and you're forced to almost in order to survive, in order to really like pay bills and do your whatever it is you're doing. um, because I think theater, I mean, anybody that's been a professional artist in theater for years knows that it's feast or famine. There's
Mhm.
times when I'm getting the phone's ringing off the hook and I've got 3 or 4 different plays that I'm working on at a time, or I'm doing like a Amex commercial in the city and doing like other things at the same time. And then there's 2 months where nobody calls you, you have no idea what's going on. And so you have to constantly reinvent yourself as a person. And you have to be flexible. And that flexibility is something that you see in Brittany, who, you know, you mentioned,
Mhm.
where she started out as an actor and then became a stage director and then became one of the most celebrated young stage directors in opera in New
Right.
York City. And opera is something that I know never crossed her mind before. Um, she put me in one of her operas, and that was something that I never thought that I was going to end up doing.
Yeah, yeah.
A world premiere opera in the city because of that. And so I think that the mentality that we all have is that it's not we're not just creatives in the sense of creating kind of a product in art. It's literally you're creating yourself and recreating yourself and being ready to and willing to put yourself into uncomfortable situations and trying new things and learning, and just kind of rebuilding yourself back up in whatever way you need.
Yeah, definitely. With that in mind, what do you think has been one of the biggest challenges that you've overcome creatively, you know, in that realm, whether it be in theater or any other kind of avenue?
I think it's I think it's really the perception of others. I think has been one of the ones that's dogged me for a long time. It's something that I've long gotten past now, but especially early on in my career, I had advice that I got from someone who I respect and who had given me other pieces of advice, and all of those turned out to be right. This piece of advice was wrong,
Mm.
and it was stuck in my head. And it was, uh, be careful about getting into different theaters with other titles. He's like, you're an actor, do that. Don't be a stage manager. Don't be a technical director. Don't do all of these other things, because they'll start to see you as that. And I think that is true if you don't force yourself into those other roles, especially in other places. If they're not giving you a chance there yet to be an actor, um, make sure that you're acting in other places and that they're hearing about it. Um, but I know what he was trying to do is to keep me from getting stuck as something that he thought that I didn't want to do.
Sure.
He didn't really know about my mindset. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's something that I love, it's fine. But that idea of the way that other people see you is very important in theater, because in the performing arts in general, because a lot of it is about image. A lot of it is about the way that people physically see you. I can walk into a
Right.
room, and if I'm not the physical type that the casting director is looking for, a lot of times they're really close-minded. Casting directors are unfortunately some of the most close-minded people that I've met. There's really great ones that you can win them over with a performance, and they'll let go of that idea and take a chance on you doing something very different than they had in mind. But a
Right.
lot of them really are very literal, and they have this idea of what the character is in their head, and they're looking for an actor that's that height, that same eye color, that same weight. Like all of those things are kind of predetermined. Um, and so that idea of how other people see you is really difficult. For me, it wasn't really as much me struggling with that, but it was really just when friends would ask what I do for a living, something that we just talked about.
Right.
What is the correct response to that when you're doing a bunch of different things? There's people that know me as a photographer only. There's people that know me only as an actor. Some people that only know me as a marketing consultant. And so early on in my career, I felt the need to talk about all of those things and have this long, like, I do this, and this. And it's not necessary. And I think that evolving to the point where I wasn't trying to get all of that information out right away, and to be comfortable with whatever it was that they saw, and not
Yeah.
feeling like I had to list my entire resume to be given other opportunities. I've realized that whatever it is that you see, you're going to get to know me, and you're going to see some of the other things anyway. If I'm interested in a specific opportunity that perhaps you can offer, I'm not pushing it in your face. And that was something that was really, really hard for me as a young actor. Because even when I came into the Onion, I was doing so many different things. I was working art department. I was doing location scouting. We were writing. We were doing all of these things, and I was worried, not with them, but at the time I was like, oh, if I want to do more TV, if I want to do more film, and my agent at the time was like, that was all he was about. He was like, you need to act. You need to focus on acting. You need to drop this other stuff.
Right.
And so figuring out how I was going to convey that, no, I'm an actor. This is really important. This is what I want you to look at me at, was something that I was just angsty about for a long time as a young actor. And
Yeah.
I think with time, you let it go. You have to.
That's true. And I think, you know, even with this idea of, you know, having the power to produce, and,
Yeah.
you know, with the technology, like we talked about, is maybe one of the reasons those things change. It's curious to me too. I mean, I wonder if in the past, before we had Twitter and YouTube and everything like that, you know, how much time would be able to dictate how much control you had over the perception that other people saw of you.
Right.
But then I think what I'm hearing you say is that, you know, we have the ability to put forward the narrative that we want people to see of our lives. I mean, it's what we've been doing this with the kids with our YouTube channel. They see things happen. We're telling you that's not how they really live. I mean,
Right.
they're showing what they want us to see because they're in control of what they're filming and putting on television. And as I was thinking of that too, it's interesting to work in a middle school and in a high school. Although, you know, with age, this tends to figure itself out. But talking about digital citizenship, and is what you're really putting out there, a thing you want to last forever. Sometimes I feel like when we approach something from the negative, I mean, it's a message that kids definitely need to know that what you put on the internet stays and all this other stuff. But I wonder if we phrase it in the way you were just talking about, where we say to them, how do you want to be seen? Who are you? What do you want to be known as? What's the narrative you're going to put forward? That might be interesting.
Yeah, instead of trying to cater to specific groups. One of the things, weirdly enough, was that helped me get past it was social media, which seems counterintuitive because it seems like you were saying social media is like the way that you want people to perceive you, which was kind of the issue I was struggling with. How do I get people to look at me this way so that I can get more acting gigs? And I realized that I'm not the type that wants to put that stuff out there. I very rarely talk about whatever acting work I'm doing. I'm not like a big self-promoter. It's just not something that interests me. I love promoting other people. But whatever gene that is, where it's like, hey, come see my show. It's playing every night I'm not that guy. And so I was really looking at the stuff that I wanted to post and the things that I was posting. And I realized that like most of what I was doing online was just, and I think it's probably because of The Onion, was just jokes. I like making people feel good. I like making people laugh. And I know that life gets hard sometimes. And so like a smile every day helps. So I try to post something. Usually the posts that I put online are just things that are funny to me, and that I think people might find interesting. And that helped me to realize that I'm happiest when I'm not pushing an image. And so maybe it's really about just being genuine online instead of pushing that idea of what do I want people to see. It's more just act the way that you would act if you were with friends. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I would probably phrase it positively. I think mine would just be make it in a reflection of who you are and what your values are.
That's great. That's great. I like that a lot. I like to end these conversations by asking, what advice do you have to young people who are looking to write or create? I think you've said a lot of that, but if you were to put it into one really juicy maxim to put out there to people, what might that be? That
wow,
one little
no pressure, right?
That's right. No, nothing, none at all.
Juicy maxim.
Earth-shattering advice to young people.
This is my
the world over.
That Aristotle moment where I get to say it goes on for ages. I think what I would say is, you know what, and we talked about this earlier. We talked about this idea of how younger generations tend to be more flexible than older generations. In business, is the first time that I saw this. A lot of old businesses are falling apart. Kodak fell apart, was a major camera manufacturer, was like the name in cameras for a long time. Sears was a big retail store that's now in bankruptcy. And they tend to fall apart when they try to drag the old world into the new world.
Yeah.
For Kodak, digital cameras became a huge thing. They didn't jump on the bandwagon, and then our phones became our cameras. And they never made that transition, and so they went bankrupt. But Sears, they tried to keep big box stores, the brick and mortar stores, physical stores, going, and try to keep that same business model that had worked for them for hundreds of years. They were a catalog company first, I think, and then became that.
Right.
So then they fell apart because places like Amazon and places that pivoted to online sales, even if they had online stores like Best Buy, you can buy stuff online or you can go to the store. They're able to stay open. And so I think the advice that I would give younger generations is when we're in a new world like we are now with the quarantine, don't necessarily try to drag old ideas or the trappings of old ideas, the way that we did things, into the new world. Just think about what it is that is important about that thing to you. For example, theater. I did that online reading. Really, the idea was to have the playwright hear the play read by professional actors for the first time and to have an audience so that he could hear how the audience is reacting, what jokes are landing. So we don't need a stage. We don't even need all the actors in the same room necessarily physically. We don't need to have all of these things that we would need for a traditional play reading. Ian was able to kind of let go of all that and just say the important thing is the play and hearing how people react. So we focused on those three elements, and we figured out that with Zoom, we could put them all together. So it's really about let go of the trappings, forget about how people used to do things. Just think about what's important and figure out how you can use the tools that you have to recreate it, whether you can recreate it in the exact same way if the circumstances allow and you think that that's the best way to present it, that's great. Or whether you want to create a new format for it, with the new tools, because sometimes new tools open up so many possibilities. At the end of it, when we were having a bit of a talk back, Ian said, you know, this is really exciting to me, this format, because I don't have to wait for theaters to want to give me play readings anymore.
Right.
I don't have to have a play at a certain point where they think it's finished enough to put in front of an audience. I can just, whenever I want my plays read, I can call up my actor buddies and go, hey, do you want to do this? And so it opens up possibilities for playwrights that they never considered. To this point, up to this point in time, playwrights really were kind of at the beck and call of theaters. When a theater had a space in their slot in their schedule where they could fit them in for a reading, they could do that. But now playwrights are realizing they have this power that they didn't realize they had before. And so it's all about that. Just reinvent. Whatever you want to do, do it. Just look at what you want, what you really need out of it, the kernel that's important, and then look at the tools that you have and put those together.
That's great. Yeah, that's
too long of an accent, but
no, that's all right. It's never that simple, right? I mean,
right?
I don't even, you know, who knows where those things come from, and
yeah,
no, but it's a really great point to wrap this up with. You use what you have, put it forward, and live in the moment. I don't know if that's really, it's not so simple as that, but I really do, like you've said, and you've given a lot of examples through this conversation of that you know, the old models may not work, and you know, we've got the power to create what we want to create now, and so get it done, put it out there, and keep going too. That's something that Tara talked about a lot, that you've said a couple times too, that I just think is worth emphasizing here. Just got to keep going, keep doing your thing, and
yeah, and
there it is.
In teaching, I think one of the biggest things that, especially on the last day of class, there's always that, you know, I'm going to miss my kids, they're going to miss me. And we have all of those conversations about like, well, when can I see you next? Like, are you going to teach next semester or whatever? But the thing that I always make sure to bring up in the middle of all of that really is, this class is over for right now, but you shouldn't be done writing. You shouldn't be done creating. You shouldn't be done acting and performing and doing your thing. This is just a small period of your lifetime. So whatever was valuable here that you found and whatever is interesting here that you created, just keep doing it. It goes on, life goes on. It's a timeline that isn't measured by the beginning and end of quarantine or the beginning and end of a play, rehearsal period or performance period.
That's right. That's right. Very good. That's great. Thank you so much, Walter. It was great to get in touch with you and to you know, to share, you know, again, we've said it a lot. We used to have these afternoon long conversations you know, when we worked at the theater together, and you know, I knew you'd have a lot of great insight and info for the young folks out there. So thanks for doing that today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. This is great.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, and we'll end the recording here, and then I got a couple things I dug up from the archive I want to show you.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Cool. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.